Ukraine has lost the war. Putin has not won it, but Ukraine has lost the war. It is exhausted. Its people's morale is below zero. There are daily defections from the Ukrainian army. They fought magnificently, and all kudos to them for having stemmed the initial push by the Russian army. But now, 3 years later, they are done. It's clear that even Zelensky understands that. Biden knew that. Kissinger's dictum that it is very dangerous to be America's enemy, but it is even more dangerous to be America's friend has been confirmed once again. Correct. Because effectively the Biden administration led the Ukrainians down the garden path. They made them promises that they were never willing to fulfill. They were never going to introduce them to let them into NATO. Right. It was simply in the interest of expanding U.S. hegemony. I remember a former chief of staff of NATO, an American general, many years ago, in 2011. I was asking him, why do we still have NATO? What's the point? He said, there's no point for you Europeans, but we need it. And I said, Bob was his name, why do we need it? Or why do you need? And he said, for 3 reasons. To keep Russia out, to keep Germany down, and to keep ourselves in. Wow. So that's, and I think he was completely right. But, Trump doesn't have this mentality. For Trump, the Ukraine war was a big strategic mistake. It cost a lot of money. It was never going to be won. It was always going to lead to yet another American defeat like Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, now Ukraine, and humiliation. And it was a major distraction to what his number one priority, which is a war with China. Cold War, hopefully, not a hot war, but he thinks that there is one game in town on the planet, and that is the containment of China. So what on earth are we doing? Wasting our resources and losing a lot of soft power worldwide with a war in Ukraine, which essentially is pushing Russia into the embrace of Beijing. Kissinger and Nixon did their utmost to keep those two forces apart. Correct. And now Biden has pushed Ukraine into the embrace of Beijing. This is how he thinks. Personally, I think he's completely wrong, and it's extremely dangerous. It's a clear and present danger for humanity to want to contain China. China is not an imperialist power. It's a regional power. It wants to control its region. There's no interest in building Chinese bases in Tijuana opposite San Diego, or patrolling the San Francisco, Los Angeles coastline. They just want to do business with everyone else. And to try to contain China in this way, risking a thermonuclear clash, is highly, highly toxic on the part of Trump. But I do hope that he concludes this pointless massacre in Ukraine quickly. And I think he's right to do it simply by talking to Putin, because the Europeans are non-existent. Who is he going to bring along from Europe? Von der Leyen. Nobody elected her. She has absolutely no legitimacy whatsoever. Correct. A local town mayor here has more legitimacy than the president of the European Commission. France doesn't have government. Correct. Macron is a lame duck. The new government that will emerge from the federal elections in Germany this weekend will take months to come together. It will be a silly coalition again, just to keep the idea out. And even if they did have a government, the Lithuanians and the Poles would veto anything the Germans say and expect the Germans to pay for the outcome that the Germans will not have a say in. So if I were Trump, I also would leave the Europeans out, and I will try to come to the most important thing at the moment: freeze the conflict, ceasefire. If we can save a few thousand people from dying tomorrow morning, we have a moral duty to save them, because their death is utterly pointless.
For many decades, obviously, Europe has been very close to the United States because there's been a security guarantee, right? Obviously, the United States, after World War II, has always guaranteed Europe's security. It's been a great blessing to have the U.S. military as that security guarantee. Do you see that shifting in the near future? Where do you think, within the next 4 years, Donald Trump is going to completely, move away from that? I have read some articles, for example, saying that Europe needs to prepare for this, that Trump is just so vulnerable that we don't know what he's going to do. And do you see a shift away from that for Europe in the future?
When people say that they think Trump is very fickle and they have no idea what he's going to do, they have not been paying attention. Trump does what he has been telling us he will do for years now. Right. Why are they being surprised? He said he's going to impose tariffs. He imposed tariffs. He said that NATO is pointless and that he is not going to be paying for European security. He's pulling the rug from under the Europeans. Why is he fickle? You may not believe your ears because you simply are in deep denial. But that's not Trump's fault.
Right.
I don't want to support Trump here, but what I'm saying is that the guy is utterly reliable. He does what he claimed. And when he didn't, under Trump 1.0, do what he was planning to do, that's because Congress wouldn't let him and because he was not well prepared in his first term. But allow me to have a very different view of why Europe is so wedded to the so-called security umbrella of the United States.
Sure.
It's not because we need the American military to defend us from the Russians. Under the Soviet Union, maybe, let's not go that far back. But since 1991, Europe does not have any enemy that can actually invade Europe with any degree of credibility and military prowess. Putin has been trying to create this military capability, but you can see that even when he unleashed an all-out war against Ukraine, he's struggling to get a few villages in muddy plains in the Ukraine. And, thousands and thousands of Russians are being sacrificed for a few yards every week or so. There's no way that even if Putin wanted to invade Poland, even if he wanted to invade Germany, there is no way he could do it. And I think our leaders know that. So what is really behind this monomaniacal commitment to the Atlanticist umbrella?
Right.
Well, if you are a German manufacturer of chemicals or of steel or aluminium, your viability depends on the United States because you're running, and Trump is right in this, you're running a large trade surplus with the United States. Essentially, the American trade deficit is like a vacuum cleaner that sucks into the United States your net exports.
Right.
And you get paid with IOUs called dollars because the United States is a deficit country. Any other country having the deficit of the United States would have gone bankrupt by now, except that the United States has the exorbitant privilege of the international reserve currency, the dollar. So they can print as many of them, of those as they want to maintain in perpetuity almost this trade deficit. But that trade deficit is the German capitalists' godsend. It is what keeps him in business.
Right.
So when, for instance, you remember a couple of years ago, Nord Stream 1, which is this large underwater pipeline bringing cheap Russian gas into Germany, powering German industry. This was blown up. Now we know that it was the United States and Ukraine behind.
Correct.
With the help of Poland. They've more or less admitted. Okay. Now you are the German industrialist. They just blew up your supply of cheap gas. They are selling you at 10 times the price Texan liquefied natural gas, which takes ages to come, and you have to pay huge quantities of money in order to build terminals. Right. Whereas you had this pipeline that was bringing you, dirt cheap gas from Putin, right? So they blow this up, and you don't say a word. Not a word, not a peep, no criticism whatsoever. Why? Because you rely on the United States trade deficit to keep selling stuff. That is the reason for the vassalage of Europe on the United States. It is the US trade deficit, which of course Trump wants to eliminate.
Right.
And when you are sitting in the boardroom of the large German corporations and you hear that Trump wants to eliminate the US trade deficit, you think, oh my God, let him fail, please.
Is the European Union, are they going to have to move closer to China to survive these new sanctions and tariffs from Donald Trump?
Let's step back from Donald Trump. Under Biden, a directive came from Washington to Brussels. Stop trading with the Chinese. Impose tariffs on electric vehicles from China. It's not that the tariffs imposed upon Chinese electric vehicles were the idea of the Europeans. They were not imposed in order to save the German car industry from Chinese competition. Indeed, it is Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Stellantis, who are against the tariffs that Europe imposed on Chinese car imports. Right. Because they're doing a lot of business, especially Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen. They're doing a lot of business in China. And the last thing they want is for the Chinese to reciprocate, to retaliate. So you have a Europe that's effectively a vassal of the United States under Biden. But in the context of the subjugation of the European Union to NATO and to the idea of the transatlantic alliance with the United States, European leaders, they held their nose and they imposed sanctions on Chinese imports. They started pressurizing their businesses to invest less in China in the context of the American plan to decouple from China, in the context of the American-led new Cold War against China, against the interests of Europe. So Europe was acting against the interests of Europe to decouple from China just in order to be America's effectively good boys and girls. And then Trump comes in and says, I'm going to treat you like enemies. What will the Europeans do in response? I don't know.